All right. Um, so I understand that you've you've had a practice and that you've done a lot of reading and that you've done one retreat. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about the retreat.
Uh, the retreat was amazing. It was a great center. Um, I I had a very kind of like psychedelic, wild experience with visuals and sacred geometry and crazy explosions of PT in my head and uh, like reality broke down into geometric parts and reassembled, and I went through wild fear and bliss oscillations. I had this really interesting insight. That was kind of terrifying. Um, I walked out of the dining hall after 11 o'clock meal, and I walked out into the courtyard, and I was looking around, and I was like, okay, I was going to go practice walking meditation before the next sit, but this thought came into my head, like, so what am I going to do now? And then I kind of had this like wave of fear, like I forgot something. And I turned around and I was looking around and I was like, there is nothing to do now because you're just doing what you're doing right now and you've always been here right now. And it was just this weird, like, kind of like a really intense feeling of deja vu or something where like saw through like time or something, and it was terrifying, and I kind of started like crying, and then I came out of it and it was fine, but it was like a little bit of a like I just didn't I saw the emptiness of time or something at that moment, and it was
Why was that terrifying?
I don't know. I think I felt like alone, or it felt like um it was just that, like, you're always alone and you always have been, and you're born alone and you die alone, and like there is no time really, and and
O-
for
Okay, so you already knew that intellectually, so what was terrifying about it when you saw it directly?
I can't say, because that experience, I was in like an altered state, like I would have been, like, I've taken lots of psychedelic drugs as well, but and it was a experience similar to that, where like you come out of it, and then the next day or whatever, you're like, oh yeah, I had that moment where I was having a bad trip, but I can't tell you why, because I could only experience it when I was in it, or like explain I could only explain it if I was there, but I'm not there
I,
anymore. So
I bet you can't.
yeah, yeah,
That's right. These kinds of experiences defy explanation.
right,
And that, in fact, all of really deep stuff defies explanation. Even the real deep teachings of the Buddha defy explanations. That's why people for the past 2,500 years have literally written millions of books just trying to get to the same point.
right,
And in fact, it goes right back to the Tao Te Ching when Lao Tzu's first opening line was, the Tao that can be said is not the Tao.
right,
So that's just par for the course. Yes, we cannot explain it.
right,
What we can do is instead point at it and hope that the student gets his eye off of the finger doing the pointing and actually looks at what we're pointing at.
right,
And that I see that that's a major problem. A clear example of that would be getting attached to a story rather than understanding the moral of the story, whether it's a fable, an Aesop fable, or the story of Adam and Eve, where all of the people of Christianity and anybody who reads it, they get all involved with Adams and Eves and talking snakes and fruits and apples and fig leaves and how did they get out of paradise and all of that. And they completely fail to understand the moral of the story is not about Adams. It's not about Eve's. It's not about talking snakes or it's women's fault or any of the rest of the story that is always told. The moral of the story is that one phrase, eating of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, and the promise that that will throw us out of paradise. Now, what we mean by the word fruit here is not real fruit like an apple, but we use it and it was used in ancient languages. We still use it today in the sense of the fruit of my labor, or even the fruit of my loins, or uh, uh, what it means is the result. In Pali, it's magga phala. We have the path and then the fruit of the path. So, this is what we mean by eating of the fruit of knowledge means having to deal with the results of what? Knowledge of good and evil. So I go around saying, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, puts us in a state of judgment, puts us in a state of hypocrisy, and that we, in fact, in our own attitudes, destroy the paradise that we're in. For example, this tree right here is part of my paradise. But look, there's a leaf that's got bug holes in it. Therefore, that's not a perfect tree. I want that tree out of my paradise. Well, if I throw every imperfect tree out of my paradise, I don't have much of a paradise left.
Right.
That's how we throw ourselves out of paradise, is through our judgments. And so, really, our judgments are based upon feeling, and the feelings of I like it lead to the judgment of it's good, and I don't. The feeling of I don't like it leads to the feeling of it must be bad. But that's not always the case. For instance, children think that it's really bad to have a shot, where in fact it's probably quite good for them. That's why the doctor is giving them the shot, etc. All right. So whether we like something or not is not good criteria for whether it's good for us or not. But it came from really, really old times when humans were hunters gatherers, and we did that with taste. If it tastes good, it's okay to eat. If it tastes bad, it's not okay to eat. And so that's how we make that kind of basic judgment. It goes way down into our genes, this issue of being judgmental. So that's the story, and that's a way of looking at the fact that the stories themselves are always confused by ignorant people. It takes some wisdom to understand that the story's got a point, it's got a moral, and that the story itself is not important. And yet, most of religion, whatever religion is wrapped up in the story, to where the Buddha and even Buddhism has, gosh, they've got a ton of stories. But the real issue is the Dhamma, and the Dhamma is really all about just one small thing, that the Buddha, in fact, said that he only teaches one thing, just one tiny little thing. Do you know what that is?
The end of suffering.
Dukkha, suffering, there is suffering, and the end of suffering. You're right. You got half credit, 50%. Congratulations. It might, in fact, be a good point to tell you at this point. I really, in my early days, were just like you at that point. Why not just concentrate on the end of suffering and give suffering itself a miss? The answer is, oh no, it needs to be deeply investigated, deeply inspected. If we don't know the source of it, we're not going to be able to eradicate it. That we really have to know what's going on before we can fix it. And so that's the whole point. Now, Dukkha, Dukkha Nirodha is the entire teachings of the Buddha, and that breaks down immediately into the Four Noble Truths. And so the Four Noble Truths is actually an umbrella for everything that the Buddha teaches. And that a complete and thorough investigation of the Four Noble Truths brings one to eradicate three fetters. Those three fetters are personality view, adherence to rites, rules, and rituals. The Pali word is Silabata Paramasa. And the third one is the eradication of doubt. And what we have specifically here is the eradication of doubt about what is the path and what is not the path. And when we say it like that, I'm actually not talking about what is the path in the sense of this little Dhamma thing. I'm talking about what is going to be your entire path for the rest of your life. How are you going to live your life? That's what this, okay, so it's a way of living, a lifestyle that we take on of the Eightfold Noble Path once it becomes noble. The process of our knowledge of the Eightfold Path starts with ordinary mind, but as the mind improves, so that the eradication of the doubt and the understanding, mostly of personality view, comes to the point that we know what the path is. Without a doubt, we know that this is the way that I'm going to live my life. That's kind of the midpoint between the path of Sotapan and the fruit of Sotapan. The path of Sotapan is to understand the path. The fruit of Sotapan is the fruit of understanding the path. Kind of makes sense that way. And so, where does all of this meditation stuff come into play? Well, the meditation that we use, when we use the word meditation, another word that we could use would be bhavana. You probably even heard that word, like Bhante Gunaratana has Bhavana Society in West Virginia. Okay. We also have a meditation center here on one of the islands in South Thailand, Deepa Bhawan. Deepa is the word for light, and Bhawan is that development. So a Bhagwan then, technically, even though it's normally in Hinduism referred to as a god, what it actually means is one who is developed, or the development of a skill. So, in fact, what I would like to do is to present to you that at least the first four qualities of the Eightfold Noble Path, the first four items on that path, are actually items that need to be developed as a skill. The first one would be right view. And the development of right view would start from, in your case, oh gosh, maybe I should do something other than drinking. And then a little bit more right view comes in, oh, perhaps it's better to watch the breath than it is to let the mind wander away. That's another kind of right view, all right? And eventually, when the right view gets noble, is when it gets completely away from the issues of the personalities and the selves and all of that, and sees things truly as they really are without any selfishness involved with it. However, that kind of view never comes to any conclusion. The real right view is the view of investigation. Let's keep investigating. Let's keep looking at what's going on. If I come to a conclusion, I'll probably one day stumble over that conclusion, because if I make a conclusion, I'll stop investigating. Anicca comes by, changes the situation, and ouch,
Yeah.
I just stepped over a conclusion. So let's not make any conclusions. Let's make our the situation open, and in that regard, right noble view winds up being a major aspect of the skills that we need to develop. The next one, which is actually quite important in a moment by moment way, to where the skill of noble right view is kind of an overarching or long term or timeless situation. The second one is momentary, right here, right now, and that's called sati. In Western Buddhism, they use the word mindfulness, but I have never heard the word mindfulness used in any context other than meditation. That's the only time I've ever heard the word mindfulness. I never heard it from a teacher at school. The closest thing I heard was mind your P's and Q's. But what it has to do with, when we use the word mindfulness, we often have the word of paying attention or whatever. But actually, the word sati means to remember, or to recognize, or to wake up. It's literally a waking up process. To recognize, oh, the mind was wandering away, and I was intending to watch the breath. Some students might even say, I should be watching the breath. So, if the intention is to watch the breath and the mind wandering away, when we wake up to that, when we remember, oh, I was going to be watching the breath, and here I'm not watching the breath. Normally, what happens is that whatever feelings we were having at that moment are either magnified or replaced by bad feelings. We don't like it when we recognize that the mind is not behaving itself. It's not under control. It's supposed to be my mind. And in fact, if there's anything about it, it is that the mind owns me, whatever me is. It's the same way, by the way, with the dog in a house. I heard people say, is that your dog? And I says, no, I'm that dog's human. That dog owns me. All that dog has to do is to come up and look mournful, and I'll feed it. I do what I'm told to do. Also, the house owns me. Why? Because it's my house, which means the house owns me. So when the toilet breaks, the house says, you come fix me. I own you. You come fix me.
Right.
When the house has a mortgage, it says, I own you. You go pay this mortgage. So we do the same thing with the mind. We begin to understand that we don't own the mind, at least not until it's trained. And then it's just a trained mind. It's still not mine. Not my mind. So we want to get it a little bit trained. So now we've got two trainings going on. We've got sati, and we've got the attitude, or the right view that, oh, we should be watching the breath. Should. So the next one is that we're going to have some effort to come out of what the mind was doing and to come back to the breath. So right effort, if it's a noble right effort, will be successful. But if it's not, then right effort makes us kind of fight and struggle and want results and we come back to the breath almost grudgingly, etc., like that, so that we're not coming back, we're not practicing correctly because we don't have the right kind of effort. Now, really, the important point here is that in Western Buddhism, they normally miss out on the quality of joy, to where in the Anapanasati Sutta and Dukkha Buddhadasa, whom I've at least written to you about, he starts to emphasize this issue of joy. That is actually a skill that needs to be developed, and it is hidden right there in the Eightfold Noble Path, and it's specifically spelled out in the Anapanasati Sutta in the form of gladdening the mind, to make the mind gladdened, sharp. So, this change requires a change of attitude, which is the fourth item on the Eightfold Noble Path, is right attitude. To change the attitude from, oh no, monkey mind, oh no, this is so hard, into recognition that you've actually become successful, right? Because why? The mind had wandered away from the breath and was wandering around the way that it always wanders around. Nothing special there. Just ordinary human life with the ordinary mind, just ordinarily going around wherever it pleases. Freud called it free association, but when you spend $500 an hour sitting on a couch with a psychiatrist doing free association, that's not free. However, now what's happened is sati has come up. The sati is there. With that sati, now you know, oh, the intention was to watch the breath, and yet the mind had wandered away. This is an important point in time because this is a major success. If you can't do that, if you can't wake up, if you can't bring that sati to the fore, then you'll never get any meditation done. If I use the word meditation in the sense of development or skill development, okay, or practice. So we're practicing sati, and we want to keep practicing sati over and over and over again until it becomes almost unremitting. Bang, 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 bang. We want that sati coming often, really many times throughout the day. The sitting meditation is a practice time so that we can start getting the sati going, so that we can start using it throughout the day. And when we get it to the point that it's unremitting, then it becomes an enlightenment factor. Unremitting mindfulness. We keep coming back to come back to come back to come back, okay? This is a skill that takes time and effort to develop. And that if you recognize sati as it comes up, is there it is, that's what I'm looking for, to be here now. Actually, sati is the waking up to watch the breath, but the breath is an anchor that brings you right into the body, and the body is here in the now. And so the sati to the breath, to the body, to the here now can happen lickety-split. And so you take a deep breath as soon as you recognize that the mind has wandered away, doing so in full joy and in full satisfaction that sati has arrived. That will be the right effort. The right effort has to have the right attitude to make this easy and joyful, so that you're pleased with your meditation the very first time you catch the mind wandering away. And the second, aha, I caught you again. And so this becomes the style or the attitude for the correct practice, is because you enjoy this process of the development of these four skills: right view, right attitude, right sati, and the right effort. and that the Buddha talks about it in the sense that right view starts is overarching and comes first, but then right view operates with sati and right effort and right remembrance circle run around each other, such that uh, right attitude is generated, so that we wind up being quite pleased with our meditation each time, because we're actually developing it as a skill, as a habit. Now that goes against the grain of everything that you've heard from society. You can't be happy because you manufacture it. You have to come buy our product, or do our ritual, or pay our taxes, or vote for our politician.
Yeah.
Only then can you be happy.
Think like we do.
Yes, exactly. And yet, when you go out into that place, you don't find any people who are actually happy.
No.
So, when I was very young, back in the 1960s, whenever I heard about meditation, especially from the concept of it coming from Asia, because after all, this was when the Beatles had come on the scene. So we're talking about middle to late 60s. That whole town, hippie town, in fact, whole 9 yards of it. The whole idea of meditation back then was the concept of bliss. That's why so many of them were doing the drugs and the meditations at the same time, sometimes not knowing which one was which. But nowadays, fast forward, 50 years, almost 60 years, here we are looking at tens of thousands of people who are now practicing meditation throughout the United States. How many of them are in bliss?
Probably a small percentage.
A very small percentage, okay?
Yeah.
So that means that everyone else is doing something wrong according to this criteria.
Right.
All right? If I can interject right now, the answer to that is because they're not manufacturing, generating, cultivating, and developing the skill of joy, the skill of gladdening the mind. That if you can gladden the mind, then you can do all of the other things that we need to do with with the practice that leads to the end of suffering. So this is number one skill to be developed, is that gladdening the mind that is built right into the Eightfold Noble Path. And a lot of people don't realize that. So even from the concept of the beginning meditator, they're already practicing the Eightfold Noble Path if they're practicing correctly, whether they ever heard of the Eightfold Noble Path or not.
Yeah, I think that's something that's like really missing in the pragmatic Dharma scene that I've learned from, which I mean, I owe everything to it. It's been, you know, definitely life changing. But yeah, that is one thing. Like I remember like what I was making like steady progress, but then one time when I remember I just like, well, what if I pay attention to this, like all this joy that, and then that was a shift. And then, but then I kept just, getting really too obsessed with like techniques and what jnana I'm in and all this, all this weird, like very technical side of it. And like just this very simple these simple instructions that right here that are
A lot
based.
of words from a lot of books.
Yeah. Yeah. But and just going back to the basics, like as you are, right here is like, this is what I'm looking for is, so I see there's not like a good way forward from where I am now without, I think, going back to the basics and doing and looking at the.
But that's the right thing to do on all occasions. Here's an example. Imagine that you had a long ladder perhaps one that, they pull the rope and it kind of doubles in size, and you've got that ladder sitting on the side of a huge building, and you get about halfway up that ladder and fall off, and you say, darn, I'm going to get back up on that ladder. Do you get back on the ladder at the place where you fell off, or do you have to go back to the first rung again? Well,
Yeah, you have to
yeah,
start over.
exactly so. In fact, this is a big quality that they teach in Zen, the concept of the beginner's mind. To always just start over again, keep starting over again. That's in fact the way that we want to do it, because if there has been any skills already developed, then by starting over again, we've got kind of an easy glide so that we can go down so that we can then get some momentum going. So, always the best thing to do is to start over again, right from the very beginning. And in regard to practicing Anapanasati, the right place to start is always right at the very beginning of step one of understanding the long breath is a long breath coming in, and a long breath is a long breath going out. That's the place that we start. I think that most of the confusion has to do with what is a short breath, because a short breath can be of many, many different varieties, but generally it's best to think of it as how much chest movement. So that the long breath is going to actually be real chest movement, and a short breath
I think I lost you. Uh-oh. If you can hear me, I think I lost you. Maybe I'll try calling you again.